Welcome back to another UNC basketball podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting, longtime AAU, longtime high school, longtime college coach, longtime connoisseur of the sport of basketball, Mr. David Sisk. And David, we are here to discuss the first 6 games, and you're also our analyst for basketball as well. The first 6 games of North Carolina's basketball season, the first 6 games of the Hubert Davis era. Tar Heels are 4-2, 2 losses to Purdue and Tennessee over the weekend at the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. Tar Heels coming off a so-so win over UNC Asheville. So-so because people thought that they would win by a lot more, and Brady Manick and Armando Bacot said that they thought they would win by a lot more. So we'll dive into that and kind of what we've seen from the Tar Heels through these first 6 games. And I'm very interested in getting David's thoughts because David and I have not discussed this. So this will be a pretty raw conversation for you guys. So David, your thoughts, a couple things that jump out, either good or bad, through the first 6 games of this season so far.
The first thing that jumps out is you're a world traveler.
I know.
So
I've been all over the place.
I told my wife, she said, "Why are you down the dumps?" She asked me why I was down the dumps for a weekend. I said, "Well, I'm raking leaves while Andrew Jones is in a casino for a weekend." So
I walked through it and I saw some machines or whatever. Actually, you walk outside the arena and like 30 steps, there's slot machines. Pretty wild place. But
I'll tell you what, if you want to see,
I was also in Connecticut, by the way. There's nothing to be
I'm not going to mention names, but it was really weird. The Nike used to put on coaching clinics at Harrah's and Tunica. So, you'd really be surprised who you'd see sitting at a poker table when those things are going on. Maybe some, I guess college coaches can play cards too. They're just, at that time, they didn't want anybody to know it.
When I was in Vegas a couple of years ago, December of 16, when Carolina and Kentucky had that epic game in Las Vegas, I went over to Caesar's Palace. I was checking a bunch of stuff out. I walked into Caesar's Palace, and 2/3 of the Kentucky players are in this one section just playing the slots. And I saw Joel Justice, who was an assistant coach at the time, a guy who played at UNCW there, and they're just walking around. I saw another Kentucky player walking in. I guess he had won some money. So he was doing all right there. And that was fine. I mean, go there, have fun. If you're going to go to take your team to Vegas or I guess to the Mohegan Sun, you got to let them play a little bit. So the Tar Heels played 2 games there, David, and they did not look very good, but they do have 4 wins in their 6 games. And I think there are some positives that people have seen, and there are some not so positives that people have seen. So where do you want to start with that?
Well, I think right now, and you got to remember who we're talking about. We're talking about North Carolina. So, I think kind of all things are relative when you talk about college basketball, because what your expectations are for UNC Chapel Hill compared to UNC Asheville, 2 different things. And your comparisons for University of North Carolina to most Power 5 schools are different. And I think you have to judge North Carolina right now, and not even right now, but all the time, on how they compare against the best teams in the country. So I think, and there's been some struggles against your mid-major teams that they've played so far. I mean, they've given up a lot of points. I live in Tennessee. Got a lot of friends, family members are here, and man, they were hitting me up after that game talking about that great Tennessee offense. And I said, yeah, the same great Tennessee offense that had 15 at the half against Villanova. And I said, by the way, they scored the same amount of points against North Carolina that Brown did. So, obviously there's been huge struggles, but I think you have to judge the University of North Carolina Tar Heel basketball team on what they do against the best teams, and that would have been Tennessee and Villanova. And, it tells me there's a lot of work to be done. And I think most people know what that is, and we'll get into that. But let me start by saying this. I think with the exception of Gonzaga and a handful of teams, everybody is kind of in that situation. They're trying to figure things out. That's what coaches are paid for. You're trying to get your team to improve, and you'll see it during the football season. You'll have teams that start out really good and they regress. You have teams that start out poorly, they get better. That's what a long season's for. There's a long way to go to March. But like I said, they play Michigan Monday. If you watch Michigan play Arizona, Juwan Howard's got his own problems to worry about. So I think there's a lot of that to go around. And there's no doubt Hubert Davis knows what the problems are. So the thing's going to be, how do they heal up on those ends?
There's no doubt. There's a lot of bizarre stuff going on in college basketball. Syracuse's 2-3 zone gave up 100 points to Colgate a few nights ago.
What Auburn give up today? Auburn got beat by UConn. I think they gave up 115.
Yeah, so it was a double overtime game, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think here's what I said in my 3 things video with Jacob that we did after the Asheville game. I said, look, there are some schools out there that are kind of feeling pretty good right now, but they're beating the Chicago States of the world, and they're not learning much. They're feeling good. They're getting some playing time. They're getting a little cohesion going on, but you want to learn about your wars. The beautiful thing about college basketball with all these events going on, the Maui Invitational by way of Las Vegas, which last year was in Asheville. So I got to cover the Maui Invitational finally, David, but it was in freaking Asheville, which is like 9 degrees. And all these tournaments going on. There's Fort Myers. There's one in Cancun. You got one down in Orlando. Lots of stuff going on. And teams Bahamas teams are giving themselves a chance to get fully exposed so they can then take a step back and say, okay, we got to fix this, this, and this. Well, Carolina did that in a big way this past weekend. Tennessee is a good team. Tennessee has a terrific player in Kennedy Chandler. Rick Barnes is a fantastic coach. He can scout teams as well as anybody. So that was a tough assignment for North Carolina. It was a game maybe North Carolina probably should have won if the talent would have played to its level. Maybe they defended better. But Purdue, to me, was a game that look, Purdue looked like a national champion. I know what national champions look like in person. I've covered a lot of them. I've seen a lot of them. That looks like a team that could cut down the nets. And Carolina, in defeat, did a lot of nice things. So do you take some of the gritty positives that you saw from Saturday and say, okay, that might really be who this team eventually becomes? Or do you focus on the negative Sunday where they didn't have grit? They didn't have great energy. And the defense was as bad as I've seen from a North Carolina team in my 26 years of covering them, David. Or do you say maybe that might be who they are moving forward? I think the beautiful thing about going up there and getting punked a couple of times is it gives them an opportunity to fully self-identify. And based on what they told us after the Asheville game, even though they didn't play that well against Asheville, is that process began Monday in practice. They had very honest discussions. So if you took a couple of baby steps in the right direction against Asheville and you could connect those baby step games, then maybe what you saw against Purdue is what this team ends up being in February as opposed to what we saw against Tennessee. Is that kind of how you look at things possibly playing out?
Practice is where it has to start. And I know this just from the high school end of it. We had a game, first game of the year, got beat by a team that we should have beaten. And we had those same talks because the effort wasn't there. And I know I told you we were talking about just going 5 new starters. You'll remember that.
Yeah.
And we played like our hair's on fire ever since. Totally different things. So you kind of see that here. I think a big part of it's just effort and communication and basic things defensively, playing together, not playing selfishly. So I go into the Purdue game, and Purdue, I think a lot of coaches will tell you from the clinical side of it, Matt Painter is a favorite for a lot of high school coaches because he runs as good, beautiful offense, schemed offense as you'll ever see. Great sets. You can see what he's trying to do. You can implement it with a high school team, things like that. But then, you combine that with North Carolina's offense or defense rather than Purdue's offense, you knew they were going to give up a lot of points. So, but the thing is, you go in and you say, okay, Purdue or North Carolina rather offensively can be really good. So I expected a high scoring game, and that's kind of what you saw. One thing about that game, we'll remember how Hubert got really fired up and his team responded. Now, It sounds good, and I think they got some mileage from that. But here's the thing that you've got to remember. A coach cannot coach effort. He's got to coach the game. He'll go to an early grave if he's got to coach effort, because you're constantly you're basically just coaching your guts out, all on emotion and all that, trying to get your team to respond and play hard. And if you're spending your time doing that, you can't work on the things that you need to work on. The team has to the players have to take care of that so the coach can coach the game. Yeah. Playing hard is not part of the game that the coach should need to coach. So you get into that. They responded. There were some positives from it. Then you get into Tennessee. They kind of hung around a little bit. But then I noticed that as Tennessee began to pull away, I really kind of think, and I'm careful how I word this, I don't want to say quit, but I think adversity, you were there. Yeah. I think adversity got the best of them. That's the way I'll put it. And I think the effort kind of went downhill in the second half, and I think they got ready to go back home. You know,
I think they were surprised. I think they were stunned and surprised and did not know how to respond to it. And you look around the court, there were no fanny smackers out there to kind of get them right. And really good teams have to have a couple fanny smackers, and they didn't have anybody. They were rudderless on the court.
See, Hubert can't spend his time again trying to coach him up and get him to play hard and do all that. So he did it Saturday, and then you run around the same thing Sunday.
Yeah.
And you notice he didn't react the same way. He can't spend all his time doing it. And I think he's probably sitting there trying to say, okay, I'm going to watch this closely. What are some things that we need to work on? But like you say, there's nobody out there. And there's a video out, and I put it on the boards on Four Corners of Rob Doster and Jeff Goodman. I think it was Field of 68.
Yeah, they were on the court below me when I was doing my three things with Jacob. They were on the court doing theirs.
It's about a 15-minute video, and it's pretty good. And they were there, and it was strictly on North Carolina. And you can find it on Twitter. You can go on Twitter, Field of 68. You'll have to scroll back a few days, but I saw it Monday morning. And, you know, they had some harsh words for the team, soft, selfish, some things of what they kind of based it on. They said, you know, it's like you say, there's no talk. There's no communication. And you can see it on TV. You may not be able to hear it, but you can tell when watch the team play defense, and you can tell when there's no communication, when they're missing switches, when they're missing assignments, when they're pointing and nobody reacts, and the guy shoots a layup and they stand around and look at each other. You know, on one of the dunks that Jaden Ivey had, you know, Love and Caleb Love and R.J. Davis, if you'll remember, really wasn't even a fast break. They come down the court, he's got the ball on the left side, and they both point at him, and nobody picks him up. And if you'll remember, he just dribbles on in and just throws it down in the first half. And it wasn't even a fast break, and North Carolina had 5 guys back.
Yeah.
So –
they had already – that was like he got the ball like the third pass on that possession.
Yeah.
At one time when he started right in front of the Purdue bench.
That's not on Hubert Davis. They have to be – I'm telling you, if your high school team pulled that stunt, the coach's head would explode. So there are things that they have to take care of. And as players, if you as a coach have to stop your time, as extravagant as a college game plan is. I mean, these teams are running complex offenses. You're coaching every movement, how you're positioned in the lane, where your back's turned, where your head's turned, everything. If you have to coach, when this guy dribbles down the floor, you're closest to him, you need to guard him. And this guy's over here, he's closest, and this guy over here can guard him. If you have to do that stuff, you're not going to it's not going to be a successful venture for anybody. So they've got to take that. And I know Hubert Davis, and listen, there's blame the pass around all the way around, but there's so much stuff that I see that the players have got to take care of, and they've got to take ownership of.
This saying, a picture tells 1,000 words, doesn't always apply, but there are times in which it does. And when I looked at the photo selections, a gallery that USA Today put up, because I didn't have a photographer up there with me, so I had to use USA Today photos. David, in the Tennessee game, every photo of a Tennessee guy in or near the lane going up to shoot, it's him, and they're up in the air, and then the Carolina guys are like this tall, because none of them are challenging them. There's always 3 or 4 guys in the picture just watching. Now, I could very easily go pull up a bunch of other games and see where the shots are a little bit more contested. I thought the defense Sunday against Tennessee was as bad as I've seen from any North Carolina team I've covered. I covered the 8-20 year. There was just a really bad team. 2 years ago, 14-19, I don't think effort was really much of an issue with them. They just weren't very talented. They had a lot of injuries. It was just a mess of a season. I don't think effort was as much of an issue last year. Sometimes you just have a bad day and stuff doesn't go right. And we were told that nobody else was sick. Leakey was sick on Saturday. And I think he could have maybe made a little bit of a difference in that game because his length could have bothered Jaden Ivey. But their issues are a lot bigger than whether or not Leakey plays in a game, because I don't think Leakey is so good defensively that he's going to change their defensive fortunes. I do think 6 games in, they have a defensive problem. They gave up 50 points in the first half to Brown, and Brown only had 2 threes. When that happened before, a team would have like 12 threes, and people are screaming on Twitter, Roy's got to defend the 3. Brown was just going right into the lane, right out of the gate. Charleston had an alley-oop dunk first play of the game. People running, they're not even really running back screens. They don't have to screen. And I don't mean to be overly critical of the Tar Heels, but it looks like they're just, Hubert's changed some things. It just looks like their heads are spinning a little bit defensively. I do think there was some progress against Asheville in communication, in helping out defensively. They look to be a little bit challenged, a little bit more of the shots that Asheville took than the other teams did. And again, like I said, baby steps are baby steps. You've got to begin somewhere. But prior to Asheville, and even at times against Asheville, it kind of looks like there's a lot of new stuff and they're all learning on the go. And it's pretty hard to do that when you're taking on a team as good as Purdue. And it's pretty hard to do that when you're taking on a team that has Kennedy Chandler at the point and is a Rick Barnes coach team. And they saw the result of that.
Yeah, but I still think they're getting beat one-on-one off a dribble too much.
Yeah.
You can keep a guy in front of you. I go on Baycott in both games, and there was more in the Purdue game than the Tennessee game, but he still had gotten some foul trouble. And I just noticed against guys his size, bigger guys, he'd get behind them and couldn't get around. And as soon as the post pass is made in there, he's got obvious 2 hands in the back shove, just the easiest fouls to call against those type of players. And, he just – what I've seen from Baycott so far this year is he's dominating the smaller players, and he's struggled with the players his size. If he can't physically dominate them, he's had some struggle. So, you go to the defensive end. So guarding the post there, we've talking about all the points. Now, I want to say this, some things that I've seen the same. Roy played the drop coverage against the ball screens. And I still say I don't like the drop cover. Now, Purdue did a lot more. Purdue run less ball screens than most teams you'll see. So Purdue hurt them with a lot of action doing other things. But Tennessee really got into that where they hurt them with a ball screen, the roll.
Pick and roll, yeah.
And the drop coverage, the screeners guys playing back in the lane. So the gist is we'll go over the top and we'll chase him into the lane, and he's got a defender behind him, and we'll try to drive him into the big guy. Now, 2 things happen. Number one, a really good guard, a college guard will eat that up. I mean, you've got to almost trap him to get the ball out of his hands. The second thing is you're wide open for the pick and pop. Caleb First hit 2 threes up top. You can see Tennessee's guys popping. They play really good stretch 4s, stretch 5s, guys like that. They can pop. And the post guy's going to be so deep in the lane. There's no way he can recover 20 feet to get out to him. So that's an issue. But you would see Tennessee curl off of it.
Yeah.
So if the big man's going to set a pin down on a wing, let's say your score's in the corner, so they go screen, the big guy goes and screens out on the wing. Well, what's got to happen is you've got to hedge that and force him to catch the ball going away from the bucket. Well, you play off, and what the cutter's going to do is just curl right off of it, or you can play underneath, okay, and dare them to shoot and not let them cut, not let them curl. But they chase it over the top. They get the curl off that pin down screen, the guy off the wing catching the ball. Man, and he's just taking off into the lane. And then you got the same thing. And then you've got that screener rolling on that deal. So they're getting a lot of rolls off pin downs, on the wings. We saw Tennessee do that over and over. So, there's a lot of issues there. But now we go back to the players. So I'll give you another example. I saw more this week of the post players, especially Baycott, on the wrong side. So they set the ball screen, and let's say it's set up top and the point guard's going to his right. Okay? So he's coming off the screen to his right. There's drop coverage. The guy guarding the screener would be dropped, but he would be dropped to the guy's left side. And he would be not only off, but on the wrong side of the screen. So he turns it up down the right side of the lane to lay it up. And there's nobody there. And that's why you play the drop coverage, to really wall it off in front of the rim. But but they get the layup. And we saw that a lot against Tennessee. And we saw it some against Purdue. So here's your thing.
We saw a lot of that against Brown too, by the way.
Not only are you having problem, you kind of say, hey, I'd like to see them contest a little bit more out of that. But what they're doing, the players are not even executing that. And you can't tell me that that's the way Hubert Davis wants that defense, even with that's the way he wants them to execute it. So I just see there's a lot of things that they got to fix, just a lot of missed assignments, a lot of lack of communication, not making extra plays defensively. When that guy does turn the corner, somebody's got to help on a drive. It's got to pinch in from the wing or the corner, and they don't do that. So they've got to start learning not only how to execute, not only how to make the correct plays, but playing for each other.
They gave up 96 points in the paint in the 2 games at Mohegan Sun. That's a lot. But on the flip side, they're not scoring a lot. And I want to talk a little bit about offense. They were outscored 96-40 in the paint at Mohegan Sun. And it was 54-22 by Tennessee, and it was 42-18 by Purdue. So if you then go to Tuesday night's game against Asheville, with 10 minutes left in the game, North Carolina, with all of its inherent advantages, had only 22 points in the paint. So if you went back to the beginning of the Purdue game, the previous 110 minutes of basketball, North Carolina had 62 points in the paint. That, more than anything, is not North Carolina basketball. I know that people said that there was an antiquated approach that Roy was running, which I don't entirely agree with, because 4 of his last 7 teams had a stretch 4. The 2018 team, when Cam Johnson came back and was healthy, Luke May was a stretch 5. So Roy wasn't married to just one stubborn approach. He played what he thought best suited his personnel. We now understand why there were some issues with last year's team. The only drivers came from the top. The wings couldn't drive, and the big guys couldn't move around. So even though Carolina's averaging a lot of points, have you seen some things that are of a potential concern with the offense the last few games? Because they were at 72 against Tennessee and 72 against UNC Asheville. And it looked to me, and I'll just leave it with this, it looked to me like some of the offensive approach right now is hope that some guys are hot that can carry it. Some guys are hot, they can carry it, then the offense looks really good. If not, I don't see a ton of shots being created on a regular basis through what would be a natural flow of offense.
I did the math there, 110 points, or what you said, 62.
62 points in 110 basketball minutes.
If you took that and divided it and then multiplied it times 40, that comes up to 22.5 points per game in a 40-minute game. And if you watched these teams in the past, even last year's, team. They scored they'd score 40 points in the paint or more than that, and you wanted them to score more on the outside. A couple things that I see. Number one, I think it started with Purdue. Armando Bacot had 2 points.
Yeah.
In 17 minutes.
He never got in the flow. He never got in the flow in that game.
Purdue. He's their back to the bucket guy. So, points in the paint. I think Dawson Garcia and Armando Bacot can score in the paint, against the Asheville, some people, and maybe better teams like that. But I think when they play these teams with big time post games and these really good teams, you can tell they're not comfortable. Bacot, Manic, he's got some good moves down in there, but you can tell he alligator arms it sometimes. You can tell he's not totally comfortable. I think they're both better stretching the floor. So points in the paint for starters in the half court goes through Bacot. So when he's in foul trouble or he's not scoring, then you've got an issue. One thing I noticed with Garcia played pretty well, played really good Saturday, but you noticed the consistency. Bacot plays well Sunday, doesn't play well Saturday. Manic doesn't play well Saturday, plays well Sunday. Garcia plays well Saturday, doesn't play well. Nobody put two games together. And it just kind of looks to me, and time will tell, but it looks to me like Garcia's better when he can stretch the floor with a 5 on him, with center rather than a 4. And Manic's better stepping out. And I wonder if Manic may play better with Bacot on the floor than he does with Garcia. And Garcia may play better when he's at the 5. Then I don't know how, if you stretch him at the – I guess the big thing is with Garcia, if you stretch him at the 4, I don't know how that's going to mesh with Bacot in the lane. I think he needs a bigger guy on him that he can go by.
Well, I think what you're saying, David, is that when Manic and Garcia on the floor together, one of them is a little out of his comfort zone, being a 5.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Garcia maybe is out of his comfort zone with a 4 on, not as much, but I think he can score on a 4. I think he'd rather have the center on him. So that's one. Go ahead.
Well, he scored 26 Saturday and had 1 bucket in the lane, and that was actually a feed for Manic. One thing I've seen from it,
Bacot wasn't on the floor.
Yeah, I have seen some 2-man stuff from the two of them. Last night, Garcia fed Manic at a very similar play, or Tuesday night. I've seen some 2-man stuff. I've seen some high-low with them. They seem to fight each other a little bit. There's a comfort thing, I guess, playing with Armando as well. I mean, these are things that could take care of themselves over time, and it is only 6 games in. And there's a lot of newness to this team, not just with the guys coming in, guys who had significant roles elsewhere. Now they're trying to mesh together, and you got a new coach. You got some tweak stuff, and you got some young guards who are sophomores, or young sophomores in the sense that they didn't have a normal year last year, and they're trying to figure out how to play with these guys, and they're trying to figure out how to take the reins. I do want to go to point guard here in a minute, but I do think that the 2-man stuff can work with Manic and Garcia, but there are certain kinds of teams where that's not going to work, because neither one of them is get on the block, get you Dario down, get post, seal, turn, and score. They don't strike me as guys who are going to consistently do that against stronger front lines. They can both do that. It's in their arsenal, but I think it has to be a part of a lot of other things. Now, with Armando, if Armando gets a guy that he could post, you could dump it into him. He could post, seal, turn, and score repeatedly. He did it Tuesday night, scored 9 straight points with Carolina feeding him. I'm not sure the other two are those kind of players.
I want to go, and a couple other things on the post, on scoring in the paint. It's not necessarily post scoring. You get into offense right now, they're not getting anything out of the 3 spot. The bigger wings, they're really, Kerwin could come at that 3 to make some threes, but as far as any scoring much from drives, they're not getting that. So there's a lot of pressure on and you look, Caleb Love and Leaky Black and RJ Davis, rather. Caleb Love and RJ Davis had good averages, and I thought played pretty well. But You know, when you're just getting, if you mix it up against good offensive team, and as bad as their defense is right now, if you have one guy scoring inside and you have those two guards scoring 16, 18 apiece, and you don't have a bunch of guys scoring, you can't match.
Yeah.
You know, my whole synopsis on the team right now is this offense has got to be great to make up for the defense. I mean, they're going to have to score 9,500 points. They're giving up 88.
Yeah.
Going into Nashville, they're giving up 88 points a game in their last four. Now, a couple other things. When you give up points, you don't get runouts in transition. Transition points are points in the paint because you're getting down to the other team's rim and shooting layups on fast breaks. They're not getting those. If you look at their transition points, they were basically non-existent against Purdue, and they didn't have many against Tennessee. Why? They're not
forcing turnovers, but they're not forcing turnovers either.
And they're making shots. Both those teams are shooting 55, 60%.
Yeah.
North Carolina has to get the ball out of the net, take it out, throw it in the other team's back. You get runouts in transition off teams' misses and off turnovers. And like you said, both Purdue and Tennessee were very efficient with the ball. So, you know, you're not getting turnovers. You're not getting long rebounds. You're not getting rebounds and outlets. You're not getting any of that. So you basically got an offense that's got to come down and set it up and trying to manufacture something. And then when you had Baycott in foul trouble, you know, it got tougher because that took your inside presence. And like I said, North Carolina's got to go, in any good team, they got to go inside out. And when Baycott's not on, then you've got to go outside in. Then you really struggle.
They're averaging allowing 17 points a game off turnovers. They've actually, the last 4 games, each of their opponents has scored 19 points off turnovers. And they're only getting 10 points a game off turnovers themselves. That's a pretty significant difference right there, especially when there's a lot of pressure on you to score. I think that's some of what we saw Sunday with the stunned nature of the team. Their body language was, oh my gosh, we got to score every time down the court because we're not stopping them. So let's go to point guard. Let's go to RJ and Caleb. I guess they're point combo guard. You know, Hubert Davis has told us several times that Caleb Love can/should lead the ACC in assists. I thought Caleb was sensational late at Charleston. I thought that was a grow-up moment, showed progress, showed that his game's matured some. And then they get to the Mohegan Sun, and he wasn't on the ball a whole lot. And some of the things that a few of us in the media have discussed, and I've discussed with other people I know that know the game, is they kind of compared it. And this is what one guy said to me. He said, you know, it's like swapping quarterbacks. If you're rotating quarterbacks, you don't have 2 quarterbacks. It means you have no quarterbacks. So if you're rotating your point guards and not one filling in when the other one goes out, but rotating them for 4 series here and 4 series there. And I'm thinking in my mind, as I tell you this, David, I'm looking down from my spot in the media area at the Mohegan Sun, and I see Caleb Love just standing in the right corner. And RJ's pounding it on the floor. And then Tuesday night, we see Caleb on the ball again a lot more. How much does that affect the growth of the team and the in-sync nature of the team? Because they're both very different players. Caleb tends to play with his head up a little bit more. RJ head down a little bit more. RJ's a little bit more of a bull. RJ's a little bit more of a 1-on-4. I'm going to score because that's what I did in high school kind of guy. I think Caleb appears to have improved his engagement with the team and his game management. His assist numbers are up. He's not taking as many bad shots this year. How would you evaluate that situation right there? And do you think that it would be wise if Hubert just said, okay, Caleb, you're the point guard. When you're in the game with RJ could maybe handle a few things if he ends up on the ball in certain situations, but Caleb needs to be the point guard. Or are you into this whole positionless stuff that they can both be point guards?
No, I think point guards are born kind of like scorers. I think you got to have a knack and a feel. I think this is one of these things that's got to be worked out because both of these guys were I'm trying to think of a phrase I can use. Both kind of works in progress at their positions, you know, and that's what we talked about. Once the floor gets spaced out, you know, that they can both play a game that they're comfortable with. And I'm going to tell you something. I've liked RJ Davis so far. I think he's made shots. You know, I think he's made a big improvement since last year. I think Caleb has, and that's going to be the thing of how you can get them to play together. I still think probably RJ at the 1, Caleb at the 2. I do believe getting it set up. Well, one thing about it, like I said, there's 2 things in today's game. I don't know that point guard's as big as it was, but I think there's 2 things in today's game that is the reason I think maybe it's not. The big thing's going to be who have you got coming off ball screens if you play a lot of that. And number 2, when the shot clock gets down under 10 seconds, who's got the ball in his hands, that you're going to try to make a play with. So, I see RJ coming off now more ball screens than I do Caleb right now because we're kind of getting into early offense.
He's more of a catch and shoot guy than Caleb is, I think.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have thought that,
No.
So I guess I'm trying to kind of watch it and getting used to the roles too because, I kind of watched early and I said, man, I didn't know RJ Davis could shoot like that. and because you're seeing him now making tough threes and all that stuff. So it's I'll be honest with you, I don't have the answers yet. And I'll probably never have the answers.
Do you think that's why we're seeing them both rotate so much? Because Hubert doesn't know. And he's like, look, we have a little bit of time to get this figured out. And we're just going to see what we are with RJ at the point, see what we are with Caleb at the point. But when I saw Caleb standing, he just appeared almost disengaged. Not that he was, he just appeared that way because he just strikes me as a kind of guy that just needs to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
And RJ, and it's the coming off the screen thing that you just talked about. RJ does that. He comes off the screen hard, does it really well. And if that's the guy that better coming off the screen, maybe he doesn't need to have the ball in his hands all the time, even though he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. But if you want to make them both coexist together, you got to try to maximize what they can be together. And if one guy's good at coming off the screen, catching and shooting, and I think RJ's got that game, then maybe the other guy needs to be on the ball more.
Well, I'm still going to say this. I think North Carolina's offense has been pretty good. That's not really the key problem. Obviously, the defense has been the Achilles heel. I thought Sunday in the second half, they kind of slowed down a little bit. Like I said, I think that momentum, they really ran into a wall there. 2 straight days of it. They probably dropped their heads a little bit. But I noticed too, I felt like they started selling for a lot of jump shots. It became a jump shooting team instead of guys trying to get to the rim. Trying to get the ball inside, because Baycott was there, trying to do some of that. Of course, they had to play catch up. And when you're doing that, a lot of teams try to do it with a 3.
Yeah.
So I just think you kind of keep working on that because and kind of start and that's what every coach has got to do. How do these guys fit with each other? How can we get them to just mesh where they're both on the floor, they're playing in comfort zones, they're playing to their strengths? I think they could do that because I just think both guys have made improvements, and I think it takes time. But like I said, I think their offense has played well. I think if their defense if they had a good defense right now, I think we probably wouldn't be worrying as much about the things with the offense because they'd be winning ball games.
Well, I think what my question is more, how long can you go like that? Can you go a whole season like that? And how much can the offense grow when you're constantly kind of shuffling in and out there and you kind of have a different approach on the ball? Because the offense has to be great every night. It wasn't great against Tennessee and they lost. It wasn't great against Asheville, but Asheville missed 50 shots. So it didn't have to be great against Asheville. And I'm just kind of wondering at what point do you have to say, okay, you're the guy on the ball every time you're on the court. When you're not, you're on the ball when he's not on the court. And I think that moment has to come. I'm just still a believer that you got to have one quarterback, you got to have one main point guard in order for things to work best. Now, some of the positives, and you started trending in that direction.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
First. How much does it help if you get consistent post play?
It helps a ton.
And then you get some. I still think Kerwin Walton's going to be your guy out there. I know, Leakey can do some things, but Kerwin, he had some shot attempts against Purdue when they're making a run there in the second half. And I remember the announcer saying, well, I guess he was too open. You know, he had to 2 or 3 times where they were crucial. So, I mean, they cut it, and it's like a possession difference. And you come down, and they don't find Kerwin, and he is wide open, you know, on the wing. And you could tell, leaving his hands, you could tell it was off. He shot one, you could tell it was right. And I don't remember exactly what they did, but, you know, if you make that they normally would, do you, like I said, do you feel better about the off? And I know what you're saying and that other part, but I think maybe if you could have some guys, you know what their strengths are, and if Kerwin starts making shots at the 3 and Baycott just starts playing consistently inside, and we find how these posts can mesh together, does it make what your 2 guards do? Does it minimize that a little bit, and does it give them more of a comfort zone? Because I think they're probably going to feel better about what they do if those other guys are doing what they do best.
Well, I think here's the dilemma facing Hubert right now, and maybe not so much now because he's still in a kneading dough phase of the season, but I can envision 2 months down the road when they're in the heart of ACC play, if they're not a whole lot better defensively, do you play the game with your guy that is a better defensive player? That is Leaky. He's a better defensive player than Kerwin. He's longer. He can agitate more. He's a rebounder. He's a rip and run guy. He got 11 boards against Asheville. Or do you go with the guy that can flat out shoot? And if you surround him with a bunch of other shooters, Kerwin should get a lot of open looks. Now, Leaky against Asheville had a wide open look from the left corner. The defender stopped and didn't even go out. It was like 8 feet away. Leaky didn't take the shot. He tried to drive on him. Kerwin would take the shot, but he wouldn't have been left as open as much. But if Kerwin's on the floor with RJ and with Caleb and with Manick or Garcia out there, it's going to get some open looks. So if you're looking ahead and you're a coach, do you put a guy who might be your best defender? I guess it's kind of hard to give anybody that claim right now because you got to get somebody that can defend. Or do you say, look, I think guys can put the ball in the bucket because we got to outscore people?
I think it depends how the other guys play and what your identity is. And here's what I mean by that. If you're Golden State and you've got Steph Curry and you've got Klay Thompson, and you remember when Durant was there, now they've got other guys and they're scoring 120, 130 a night. And those guys can just light it up. You can afford to have Draymond Green in the game. But then when you got, if you'll know when they're hurt or one of those guys are hurt and they don't have as many scores, you can't afford to have them in the game. So yeah, there's so here's what I'm trying to say. If you're North Carolina and you have some of those other guys offensively, we talked about getting them clicking, and they start doing that, then I think you play Leaky Black. But if you're having some offensive struggles, then you need some shooting, then I think you're going to have to go with Kerwin. And I still think, I wonder at a time if you slide Kerwin over to the 2 a little bit and give him some reps there when you're resting, one of your 2 guards. So, there's just a lot of different ways to go. I don't know. I think you just got to see how the team's playing, what their identity is. Like I say, if they're giving up a lot of points and you look and the 3's a big reason for it, you've got to play Leaky. So I just think it goes as this team goes.
I think a lot of this stuff's ultimately going to be answered on its own.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I can't sit here and say, but I'm giving you,
it's only, David, we're only 6 games in.
What it has to be, because I think they're what ifs with the coaching staff right now, because you just got to see how this thing pans out.
Only 6 games in, and people might be thinking we're making mountains out of a lot of molehills, and we're not. We're just discussing what we've seen so far. And I'm heading in the direction of some of the things that have been very positive. Last year, Carolina's had more 20-point scorers already this year than they had all last year combined. There's been a 20-point scorer in every game. So one of the things I really like about this team is the go-off ability that they have with at least 5 guys. Manic has been in the 20s twice. Armando's been in the 20s 3 times, I think now. Garcia's been there. RJ's been there twice, I believe. Caleb's been there a couple times. They have go-off ability. They have guys that can just carry you in 3 and 4 minute stretches. What Garcia did against Purdue, especially when Carolina kind of felt like, man, Purdue's close to maybe giving one of the blows that they need to give to them. And Garcia just kept stepping up, and he made that 3 that gave Carolina the lead. I swear, I think he turned to Theo Pinson and gave him a flex or something. And then, of course, Purdue ran off a 10-0 run right then and there because Carolina can't get stopped right now. And Purdue was very good in that stretch. I think one of Ivy's dunks that you were talking about was in that stretch right there. But offensively, I like the fact that this team has the ability to score when there's a bad possession. I used to talk about J.J. Redick all the time, that I've never seen a guy bail out bad possessions more than him. You could have a crappy possession, terrible screening, terrible cutting, poor movement, bad spacing. Oh, J.J. hits a 26-footer. What a great possession. I think Carolina's got guys like that. And they've got guys like that that could score a lot of different ways. I do like how the decision-making that RJ and Caleb make when they drive now. They're not throwing as much garbage up to the rim. They're not taking as many bad shots. They still do every once in a while. But I do think that the IQ portion of their shot selection is up, and they have a better ability at getting themselves enough separation to get those shots up. I like the variety in Manic's game. And I think if Armando's playing well, a guy like Manic or Garcia, they could really play off him very, very well with the way that their skill set is. Kerwin had a really nice a jump shot on the break the other night. At first, I thought, well, you got to go to the rim, but that's not Kerwin's game. Kerwin, I think, knows his game, and he could be an asset when things are moving very, very well. So offensively, you kind of said that this team's going to have to outscore people if they don't get a whole lot better defensively. But how good can this offense be? And how often do you think these guys can roll into games against ACC caliber opponents and outscore them? Do they have enough weapons to do that a lot of nights?
Well, I think if you do that, I believe you can always count on defense every night if you're good at it. But I think sometimes you have bad nights. So that's when it's tough. I tell you who, they're different, but the same scenario I would think about Iowa last year. If you remember, you would go to Iowa when North Carolina went up there. You knew Iowa could score, probably we're going to score in the 90s, maybe 100. But you felt like you could score, you could go up there, you could score a bunch of points too. The thing was, could you score enough? And when you played Iowa, 85 wasn't enough. So,
but if a couple of their guys were off, or somebody hit the skids, then you're right there in position to strike.
And if you'll notice, as the year went, scouting reports mean so much in sports, in college basketball. When you play that team, and there's 2 things. When somebody gets a something on you that works, we call it the blueprint. They found a blueprint how to play this team. And it's a copycat. Anything, sports is a copycat deal.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and coaches, that's why they watch film. They see what a team did against them. They'll do. You see it in football all the time.
All the time.
So, so it's So there's one thing. And secondly, when you play a team the first time and you come back and play them again, you adjust to that. And you start to say, I know all the time we'd say, man, we'd like to play that team again. We'd do this. We'd do that. So, and that's the issue too. If you watched Iowa last year, when they started going through the Big Ten a second time and they were playing these coaches and these teams again, they didn't shoot it nearly as well. And I know they had a couple of injuries, but they defended them much better and they were contesting shots better. They picked up on stuff. So North Carolina, they can be good offensively, but the defense is going to have to come along as the year goes, because when you get that second time around in the ACC, man, it's really going to be tough. And you're playing good teams anyway. I think I said this before the year started when we had the THI Zoom, and I named some teams I thought North Carolina was better than. No, it's not worked out. It's not worked out that way right now. They're not better the way they're playing, But I look at this team offensively. My goodness, they can score in so many different ways. And like I said, if these guys start clicking inside, they've got shooters. They can get to the rim. They can score in transition. You know, Baycott, Garcia, and Manick can all score. You've got shooters out there with Kerwin. I mean, they've got everything you want. So I think they can score a lot of points. But like I said, and the defense doesn't have to be great. Does it kind of remind you of North Carolina? Does it kind of remind you of North Carolina in football or Wake Forest or some of these teams? They score a ton of points. If they hold you to 30 or 35, it's probably good enough. But if you're Wake Forest and you go to North Carolina and you go to Clemson and you give up 50, you know, all they got to do is hold you for a possession or two. So, you know, it's the same way in basketball.
Anybody surprise you in the positive so far from Carolina?
Yeah, I think the guard, like I said, it's not a surprise. I just liked how Davis and Love have both gotten better. And a lot of people may not agree with me, may not see it, but I know from watching them last, it seems like they're more in the comfort zone. Like I said, I watched RJ Davis doing things out there really that I didn't know he could do. With his outside shooting, with those things, I think they've both really gotten better.
I think they're both going to get a lot better over the next couple of months too, David.
Yeah.
I think as much as we've seen the improvement already, I think now that they're putting a lot of those improvements into action and they're still figuring some stuff out, I think that they're going to get a lot better over the next 3 months.
Manick and Garcia, looking at their strengths that they've played to, they're pretty much kind of what I thought they were going to be when they're playing well. So is Baycott. They just got to be consistent. But I think the thing that I'm seeing right now in a positive far surprise is how much to go. And I've got confidence in RJ Davis and Caleb Love. I really do. And let me say this, offensively, I have confidence in this team. I think it can be one of the best offensive teams in the country. They've just got to find a way where their defense is just not putrid. I mean, it doesn't have to be great. Let the defense be fair to good. It doesn't have to be very good. If they can have an old Southern phrase, if they can have a fair to middling defense, I think it can be good enough.
I think the surprise that I've gotten from Manick is that he's more rugged than I thought he would be. He doesn't mind mixing up. I'll tell you what, if they're charting box outs, I bet you he leads a team in box outs.
Yeah.
And that's not saying a lot because they've not been consistent in that. They were better last Tuesday night against Asheville, and they actually had a plus 22. I think that the rebounding's been a slight disappointment so far, but Manick's been a little bit more rugged than I thought he would be. I'm still trying to figure out Garcia's game. You and I both talked multiple times, and I think we both agree that Garcia might be the one that takes the longest to find a comfort zone for a variety of reasons. And I think that's the case, although that performance against Purdue was very, very positive. And I like the fact that he doesn't have a super quick release, but he can shoot over guys in the perimeter and he gets open. You know, when he gets the ball in the perimeter, he's wide open. So he doesn't always have to have a quick release in this setting because he's already wide open. He can lock and load.
You ask me another, and I'll let you continue that. I just want to interrupt a second, and that's another one. If you ask me one that kind of surprised me, I've stepped away probably thinking, I know he had a pretty good percentage last year, but it would be I didn't know Dawson Garcia could shoot threes off a pop that well.
Yeah, he looks very comfortable. He doesn't look he never really looks out of sorts out there. Now, he doesn't have great spring, but I think he's got a pretty good stride. And again, I just think he's feeling stuff out. I think he could be a guy on the block player because he's so long. He's got efficient body movement. He's pretty strong. I think he's stronger than some people will give him credit for. And he's got that length, man. He can get the ball over people. I would like to see him as the 5 and Brady Manick as the 4 when they're together, because I do think that because of Garcia's strength and his length, And I think his ability to use his hip really well, he might be a little bit better in the paint, even though Brady's very cagey inside. But if you could put Brady in a catch and shoot situation from 20 feet from the basket and get him 5 or 6 of those a game, you'd be foolish not to, because that dude's got the quickest release. Although Sasha, what's his name from Purdue, had a really quick release too. But Brady's got a quick release. He can shoot over people, and he is ready to let that thing go when he gets it. I think that when those two are together, that to me is what I envision is maybe working best when we get into January and February and March.
I'm not against a 5 out with them in there either.
They got to cut. This team needs to cut more than it does.
I understand that, but here's the thing. I think you can use them. I think you can start out with one of them on the block and go screen.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you don't set the screen. You're really faking it and slipping it into a pop situation. I think you could do that. And then I think that you kind of open the floor up with Love and Davis on a drive. And you got to find ways to do it. But, you can think of some coaches now in games where, and what they'll do, they'll just play Manic out on the, in the corner, and you've got to move. Like you say, you can't stand still, but then you can go screen or you can pop of Garcia and open it up. And now you've got to drive and kick with shooters around, because you think about it, if you've got either Love or Davis, we've made that case which guy you got, and then you've got Kerwin Walton, and you've got, let's say it's RJ Davis, and you've got Love, Kerwin Walton, Garcia popping, you've got Manic in the opposite corner. And so you've got RJ Davis on the drive, and that's who you've got around the 3-point line. I think it's hard to defend.
And like I said, we've seen some two-man stuff both ways with Garcia and Manic, and I think a 5 out, that could really play to their strengths. I think Carolina fans are going to have a lot of fun this year when they have the ball, and it's going to be a little bit not so fun sometimes when they don't. It's going to be an interesting team, and I'm with you 100%. I know that a lot of people are down on the team. I'm sorry?
No, let me say this too while we're on offense. And I'm not waving pom-poms here, okay?
Oh, of course not.
No fan, I promise, no fan.
No, we don't do that.
But
I'd fire you if you did.
But now we've talked about the defensive side of the ball, about what we don't like, what they're doing strategically, but a lot of it's on the players and all that too. I've made this statement on the board. I've made this statement in my stories when we've done the film review. I really like Hubert Davis as a play caller. I think he's a good – what I've seen from him so far, I really like what he's done with the offense. I've noticed too, when they run sets or he calls something up, it's spot on. They can really spread the floor and look good doing that without calling anything, and then they can jump into something and he'll call some good stuff. They still run a lot of the stuff that Roy did at times, whether setting with a box set with a diagonal screen, or that old Carolina secondary back screen, ball screen, or ball screen, back screen into that, doing all that stuff. But they may not do quite as much of it, but they still do that. They run it well, and then they spread the floor. I like what he does offensively. And like I said, I like this team offensively from the player standpoint, with the talent, with the skill set that they have. I think they got a bunch of good players. I like the way Hubert Davis calls an offensive game. They got to get better defensively.
No doubt about it. And I'll tell you another thing too, with some of the commentary about maybe possibly being a selfish team and that kind of stuff. When Hubert has called shots for guys, he's called plays for guys. The 2 threes that Kerwin had in the second half of Charleston were straight up called. He called a couple of things for Dawson against Purdue. When he's called those plays, they've run the plays and they've gotten those shots. So for the people that are I know a lot of Carolina fans, I call it the church Carolina basketball. We knew the panic meter would be up, especially if they didn't play well. It's typical how Carolina fans react and overreact to stuff. And I do think that we've seen some stuff that is cause for concern. But the reminder, it's just 6 games in. It's just 6 games in. There have been some positive things that we've seen that shouldn't go away. This should still be a team that can score points. They've got explosive guys. The stuff that needs to get better, there's time for those things to get better. And, when they do, if they improve defensively 15 to 20%, which might be enough, then I think you're going to, if they're getting some stops, guys usually get more excited in the college level when they get that stop on defense than sometimes when they have a great sequence on offense, because it usually takes 5 guys to get a stop on defense a lot of the time than it does to score a basket. So they're a lot more engaged when that happens. And if we do see them pick it up 15 to 20% over the course of time, it's going to be an interesting team. And I think the ACC is going to present a lot of winnable opportunities because, like a lot of college basketball, the power teams, like you said earlier, there's only a couple really, really, really good teams. There are a lot of clubs that could be outstanding on a given night and a lot of clubs that could be had on a given night. And Carolina's in that mix right now.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of time. There's a ton of time to get better, David.
I know you were there. Like I said, I was in between raking leaves here. I was at home. I can't get out and run around like you do. But
see, the difference is my wife is happy when I go. She doesn't tell people that. She doesn't admit it, rather, but she loves when I have long road trips.
Oh, don't.
So your wife wants you. Your wife wants you home.
Don't think mine's not either. There's no difference. But the thing, and I know you probably didn't watch the game. Go back and watch the replays or anything. But that's what the announcers kept saying, that they thought North Carolina said, and North Carolina ended up being okay. And one thing they pointed to was that this is not an ACC league that has been strong as what we've been used to in the past. Yeah. So, outside of Duke, he talked about, they were talking about, I think it was Franford Schiller maybe, was talking about Florida State, not what they were, Virginia, not what they were. So, who's it going to be? So,
Syracuse lost at home to Colgate. Louisville's lost at home to Furman. Notre Dame lost again the other night, lost to St. Mary's in Maui. So there's a lot of teams taking their lumps right now. And if you look at them all next to each other, the club that if it improves 15 to 20% in one area, that could spring forward, I think North Carolina is that club. And I do agree. Duke is heads above everybody else right now. Yeah.
So, that's a standpoint. I think Duke, no doubt. They play Gonzaga Friday night, so they could get humbled.
Well, and that may not mean that Duke's not real good. It just might mean that Gonzaga is just clearly the best team in the country.
Yeah. So and who knows? I thought I watched Duke Kentucky. I was very impressed with Duke that game.
Yeah. So they combine the skill and the grit. They look like a club that can handle a lot of different stuff.
We're going to lose viewers talking about Duke, but
what's the ACC and Carolina fans know? They know what I've covered before.
North Carolina, here's what I'm saying, can fit into that top. They can fit into that top rung. So you just got to get better at some of those spots. But this is not the 1986 ACC.
No. Look, the weekend was terrible defensively, and in the Purdue game was terrible defensively as well. They just showed a lot of grit, but they identified a lot of things, and they were open about that when we talked to them after the Asheville game. So, look, if you got a problem, the first step in fixing it is identifying it. And so they did. So let's see how they improve. I'm going to tell Carolina fans that are watching this right now, and I said this in our 3 Things video after the game Tuesday night, do not expect March, where are we? This is November 24th. We're doing this video. Don't expect March 24th defense right now. It's not going to happen. You got to watch this thing slowly unveil itself, if it does slowly unveil itself. And if it does, this club's going to get better and better and better. And it'll be very interesting to see what they can develop into. There's a ton of time to become the kind of club that Hubert Davis says they could be. And he says they could be really, really good. He called them a national championship team the other night. He said they could be a great defensive team. So he's laid it out there. And our job as journalists ultimately is to cover them based on those mission statements. And so we're going to do that. But I'm not going to anoint them a national championship team or say that they're not on November 24th, because in this sport, that's foolish. We must allow this thing to play itself out. And we're going to have a chance to do that. Now, I think it's going to be really interesting watching this club navigate through the next couple of months and become whatever it is they're going to become.
Yeah. And, I go to, to different sports, but college football is kind of that way. And you just can't, in old words of Denny Green, you just can't crown them or anoint them, early on, and you can't give up on the team. I go back, if you would have told me 6 weeks ago, if you would have said, I'll give you South Carolina even against Auburn,
Yeah.
I'd have bet everything I owned. South Carolina was as bad as any team I've ever seen, in a Power Five. The week that Auburn beat Ole Miss, South Carolina had 15 total yards of offense going into the fourth quarter against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I think, had like 500. Yep. So, and then you can turn it around that quick. So, like I say, you have teams that get better and you have teams that regress, and that's the beauty of sports. Nobody stays the same.
Look at Florida State. Look at who they lost to back in September. Now look at them. If they beat the mess that are the Gators, they're going to a bowl.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. So, yeah, I think it's going to be fun to see what this team becomes. I like the variety of all the different potential storylines with this group. And look, if they get better a little by a little defensively each game, this could be a pretty good club when we get into February. So Carolina fans just got to they got to have patience, man. Stop with a lot of the nonsense that people are throwing out there. Give this thing a chance to blossom.
And they're going to get opportunities here. December is going to be very interesting. You've got I don't have the schedule in front of it.
Yeah, they got Michigan and Georgia Tech next week. Georgia Tech on the road.
Georgia Tech, and I was trying to think what else was in there, but then you got UCLA later in the month.
Yep.
Just take a week. I like this is an important week just as far as practice, because you talk about getting with it in practice, but I always thought that for college teams, this was an important week. I called it boot camp week. When you go into Thanksgiving, you have finals. A lot of teams do mid-major scheduling, and they just set it up. And you play once or twice a week, and you don't have 10 days off. And you're doing 2 a days and 3 a days, and you really got a chance to work on things. So I'm interested to see not only how the players improve. I'm interested to see what Hubert Davis's stamp that he puts on of how this team, because now is when it can be done through practice.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see what I love so much the whole process of college basketball, David. I've been doing this for so long. I've seen so many teams that look so different in February than they do in November. And I believe that has the chance of being the case with this club. And quite frankly, most everybody in the ACC. There's a lot of this going on around the league right now.
I would like to hear a Michigan basketball podcast right now and hear their woes and what they're trying to figure out, because I'm telling you, I watched a little bit of Arizona, and man, I was interested to see that. And it just didn't look like the Michigan team that I've seen the last few years. So, and they were number 4 in the country. Man, they didn't look for. So, and Arizona.
And that'll be an interesting battle next week.
It come out to a point where Arizona, like I felt like they kind of threw in the towel themselves, and Arizona was just getting run outs and dunks and everything else, and Michigan just didn't look like they had very much fight. So I can see 2 coaches here really, really trying to challenge their teams this week. I think both are coming in to where they played good opponents and they were embarrassed.
Absolutely, or Hubert rather. Yes, absolutely, David Sisk, our director of basketball recruiting, longtime AAU college and high school coach, and our scout, our analyst. And if you have not seen David's film reviews, it is a must, and you can have access to all that stuff for just $8.33 a month. And who knows, maybe we got some specials coming up here on Rivals pretty soon where you can access it without having to pay that for a week or 2 or a month or whatever it is. So stay tuned to THI for all kinds of neat things coming up and all these David's coverage. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. We very much appreciate you stopping by.